Why was music in the 1990s so much better than anything that's been released in the past 20 years? Take a look at this clip from the always brutal Frankie Boyle.
I'm only kidding, we've got some famous faces in. Who have we got? We've got Jamila. Jamil, how you doing, Jamila? You alright? It's exciting for me because you present the Radio 1 chart show. You get to tell the nation what is number one every week. And the only way that that could be more exciting, I think, would be if it was 20 years ago when anybody gave a
Now, I remember growing up and hearing my dad and my uncle tell me about growing up in the UK in the 60s with the Beatles and Beatlemania. My dad told me that you could walk on a bus and they were so popular, you could even ask the bus driver, do you like the Beatles? And he would go, oh yeah. Me and my brother got to grow up in the 1990s when BRITPOP was massive, when Oasis were on the front cover of every newspaper. And I remember I tested the same thing. I got on a bus as a teenager and I asked the bus driver, do you like Oasis? And he was like, yeah, I love them. And now here I am. I've got two sons and it looks to me like there is nothing for them. So why was the music scene in the 90s so much better than now? Well, I could answer that question with two words: guitar bands. But of course, there is far more to it than just that. Radio stations, especially BBC radio stations and Radio 1 in particular, simply will not play guitar music anymore, no matter how many millions of people still love it and still listen to it themselves. Record companies won't sign guitar bands anymore, despite how many millions of people still love that kind of music. For a long time, the record companies and the radio DJs in the UK, they've held the keys to success for new acts. And nowadays, the reason we don't hear great new British guitar bands, great new British rock music, is not because it doesn't exist anymore. It's because these gatekeepers, the BBC radio stations and the UK record companies, they just are choosing not to promote guitar bands anymore.
I've been sort of looking at listening to a lot of music over the past few months, but I was just thinking, God, music has changed. The type of music that's being written these days has changed so much. But I wondered to myself, are there ever going to be bands that do that again? And I don't know if there are. It's got a lot to do with A&R. It's got a lot to do with the music business and who they sign. I just listen to the charts now, and there's absolutely nothing there.
Well, in fact, we were saying earlier on that I don't think you get an album like The Man Who now. I just don't think a big guitar album would exist in this current climate. Do you think if you were releasing The Man Who now, do you think it would be the success that it is? Do you think a lot of it was down to fashion?
I don't even think it would get a deal now.
Really?
Yeah, of course not. Look at the charts.
And you know what? He's right. Over the past 10 years, I have regularly flipped on BBC Radio 1 just to see what they were playing. And I'll be honest with you, I never last more than 10 seconds because it's always crap. The station that once pushed the Beatles, that once pushed Queen, the Smiths, Oasis, now they play nothing but utterly awful rap music and dance music. Unlistenable garbage. BBC radio stations are playing music that simply means nothing to 90% of the British public. And I know this because when we're not in lockdown, I gig most weekends, sometimes 2 or 3 times on a weekend I'm playing live. And I know what kind of music gets people up and dancing, and I also know what kind of music clears the dance floor. Most people still love rock and roll music. Most people still love guitar bands. The problem is the record companies and the BBC will not push them. So what is it that caused this massive shift amongst the record companies and the radio stations? 2 words really: file sharing. Look at 2 of the absolute best classic indie albums of the 1990s. The debut album by The Lars from Liverpool and the debut album from Oasis, Definitely Maybe. Both albums are incredible. Both albums ended up being massive success stories, but both albums had to be re-recorded at the record company's expense 3 times. Imagine the money the record companies put up for that. And in the case of the Lars, they never even did actually get it right. They just gave up halfway through the third attempt, and the record company just pieced together the album from bits and pieces and outtakes that the Lars had recorded so far. And how did the record companies fund these multiple attempts at getting it right? From physical sales, from CDs. Bands used to be able to sell their music because it came in a physical format. There was no other option. Now, all music is free, and that has repercussions. The old way of doing music has been completely decimated by the internet and by music streaming. Once all music is completely free, it can't function in the same way as a business. And so, then you get record companies choosing not to promote brilliant but difficult original artists, but rather they will commission a song that's written by a professional songwriter to manipulate or target a specific audience, to get some kind of calculated emotional reaction. Those songs are then performed by studio musicians, they're mimed by attractive dancers on a video to maximise sales, and none of this has any connection to how the British guitar band scene was in the 1990s. The music business has undergone a complete 100% paradigm shift to the other direction because of the most fundamental driving force in any business: money. So how were songs written by the rock and roll indie rock bands from the 1990s? Well, in the 90s Britpop movement, the songs were written by the musicians who performed them in almost every single case. And this is exactly how it's been for tens of thousands of years throughout human evolution. It chimes with something in us when a songwriter writes and performs his own song. There's something authentic, there's something genuine about it, and I don't know how, but somehow we can feel that. Somehow we can connect to that far more than some song written in a boardroom for a target audience. Also, the Britpop bands would record their songs in the studio in a fairly laid-back way. They didn't strive for absolute studio clinical perfection, but they kept a massive human element in their music. There are inconsistencies and small mistakes that they intentionally left in there. And this also connects to kind of how we naturally appreciate music and how we evolved. Imagine tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors would have made music sat round a fire, and everyone who could join in a bit would. People would clap, people would make mistakes, people would bang stuff together. We have evolved to appreciate music that contains things like hand claps, that contains things like stringed instruments and drums and vocals. When we hear some computer-programmed synthesizer, that's completely new. That's not resonating with anything deep in our evolutionary history. That's just something new, and I think I'm not alone in listening to that music and feeling that it says nothing to me. The Britpop bands overwhelmingly used analog, real instruments, and they avoided synthesizers, preferring to focus on more organic instruments. Compare that to today's highly processed dance music, where everything is quantized by computers to surgical perfection. Music for robots, by robots. I really and truly believe that the music of the 1960s and the music of the 1990s wasn't just better written, it didn't just sound better. I believe it resonated deeper with us as human beings because it was much closer to the music, the homegrown, natural, organic, non-digital music that we have evolved to appreciate. Since launching this channel, honestly, I've been blown away by the level of passion that is still out there for genuine, authentic British indie rock music. I can only speak for myself here, but I think I'm not alone in feeling that I'm not ready for this kind of music to be consigned to the past. We need more of it. And the fact that so many teenagers today are falling in love with Oasis shows that this kind of music is timeless. It didn't just resonate with us, it also resonates with new generations who sadly, like my kids, don't have any good new British guitar music of their own to claim. Not yet, at least. So they have to look to the music that we grew up with instead. That's such a shame.
You know, because often I've wondered, what's a fucking 14-year-old getting out of this after all these years? You know, when I'd see them at the gigs, what are they hearing in that now for their ears in 2020 that they're not getting? Because there's nothing around today that's even remotely comes near to it.
So, with that in mind, I have actually come to a decision. Because there's so much love out there for this kind of music, and because there seems to be so many thousands of people in the UK and worldwide who are not ready to say British indie rock is a thing of the past, I've decided that I'm going to start making some new music myself, and also, as I start making videos for you guys, going in depth, analysing the tones, the style, the recording techniques and production techniques of this golden age of British music, I'm going to start applying it to my new songs to try and make some new British indie rock music. Not only that, I'm going to show you how to apply it to your music too. We can get this fake, plasticky, processed garbage out of the charts and bring homegrown songs written by the same people who sing them back into the mainstream. And I'm not messing around here. There are more than enough of us out there to do it. There are more than enough of us to start to turn the tide in the UK. It's happened many times before, so why can't it happen again? Guys, if this matters to you, please share this. I make a point of never asking anyone to like my videos. I make a point of never asking anyone to subscribe to my channel. But when it comes to this, it really does actually matter to me. This is important. This is actually personal to me. I want to see British guitar music come back, and I hope you do too. I want to get as many people involved as possible in trying to fix what is so clearly and obviously broken in the British music scene. And to make it clear that I'm not saying this out of any ulterior motives, I am not going to monetize this video. I'm not putting any ads on this video. This is for the cause of trying to get British guitar music back in the mainstream and nothing else. In the 1960s, there was a massive explosion of incredible, world-beating British guitar bands. 30 years later, in the 1990s, there was an explosion of incredible, world-beating British guitar bands. Guess where we are now? 30 years later. The time has come for the next great British guitar band revolution, and ladies and gentlemen, we are going to make it happen. Great Britain produced the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Queen, the Smiths, the Who, Oasis, the Verve, Pink Floyd, the Jam, the Kinks, the Clash, Radiohead, Arctic Monkeys, David Bowie, Deep Purple, Fleetwood Mac, Iron Maiden, The Police, Cream, Dire Straits, The Animals, Muse, the Stone Roses, the Sex Pistols. This is not over.
If we're going to get rid of Phil Collins and Sting, junk food music, McDonald's music, we've got to get in the charts and stamp them out. Do you know what I mean? I want the severed head of Phil Collins in my fridge by the end of this decade, and if I haven't, I'll be a failure.